all the jobs she was raised in order to keep. Yes, I know. You've heard a lot of it many times.
Honored to be hosts today, and we're honored to have all of you here today. Take an applause for everybody here. Friends Theresa Bonbane for their book, Sister Rebel, and not just for that, but also to honor our dear friend Theresa. And all of you here, hopefully all of you know Theresa. And I'll say that, okay, there's talking in the back there. We got to,
Does everybody have a chair, or do we need to set up?
we need more chairs? We got a pretty full turnout here.
There's plenty more chairs.
We need more chairs.
I discovered Theresa and Blase Bonpane on KPFK. Anyone have a radio? Anybody here know about KPFK? Around 1980 when I discovered the station. And I've gotten to know Blase and Theresa all these years. And many of you that are here today. And so we're very excited about this new book, this book by Theresa. And also, this is the first gathering, the last gathering, political gathering I was at was just before the pandemic started, and it was at the Peace Center with David Swanson. And so he made up in there. And that was, I don't know, 2000? It was the last political event. The last event I was at, some of you may have been there, it was at this church on June 20th, where we had the memorial for my wife Jane. And Reverend Janet, who's here today, over there, who's been speaking, she did the memorial for my wife Jane. So, thank you again to everybody for being here. I'm going to, in fact, okay, I'm going to introduce Reverend Janet McCutcheon. She's the minister from the church in Ocean Park. It's in Santa Monica. They just had their grand reopening last week, right, Janet? So come up here, Janet's going to say a few words, and we're going to get on with the program. Reverend Janet's my minister. She's Teresa's minister. She's everybody's minister, and she's our friend, and she's fantastic. We love you, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our mother's here today, too.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. And I was asked to say a few words and a little reflection about some things that are happening around us. I would like to believe that people of many faith traditions and people of no faith tradition want to live in peace. I would like to believe that people care about other people's lives. I would like to believe that people want to live in peace. But it's hard to see sometimes. It's hard to see that people who make decisions to murder other people actually want peace. It's hard to see that people who cut off access for food, water, and medical care truly want what's best for other people. People have different perspectives about what's happening in the Middle East and who is to blame and what should be done. Longtime friends and family members are no longer speaking to one another. Strong, lifelong friendships have been severed over a difference of opinion. Some of you might have had that happen in your lives. I would like to believe that we can still talk to each other. In this moment when there is so much pain all around us, let us pause for a moment, and as peacemakers, let us hold each other up, not tear each other down. Let us pause for a moment of prayer or reflection. O Creator, we grieve the deadly October 7th assault on Israel and many innocent lives that were taken by the terrorizing actions of Hamas. We further grieve the spiral of violence once again ignited by these actions and the resulting loss of Palestinian lives and the escalating devastation brought to Gaza. We recognize that Hamas does not represent all Gazans, and the Israeli government does not reflect the wishes of all Israelis, let alone all Jews. We condemn anti-Semitism and Islamophobia here and abroad. We recognize that this conflict did not begin with this deadly attack by Hamas. The history is important and complicated. We call attention to the Israelite prophet Isaiah. Many people shall come and say, "Come, let us go unto the mountain of the divine, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us the holy ways, that we may walk in the divine paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction, the Holy One shall judge between nations, and shall arbitrate for many people. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. And we lift up the teaching of 6th century CE Islamic light of guidance, the Prophet Muhammad, who taught, no one shall become a true believer until they desire for their siblings what they desire for themselves. As people of faith and people of no faith, we call upon all parties to pursue an immediate ceasefire and the restoring of access to needed supplies. Let us commit ourselves to forging relationships based upon love, mutuality, and respect. Let us continue to advocate for human rights and uphold the dignity of humanity, and let us seek to model among ourselves the quality of relationship that we would like to see fostered in our larger world. With all of this heavy on our hearts this morning, we are so glad to be together for this amazing sharing this morning and afternoon, and for Theresa's book, and for Theresa's sharing of her life, being so vulnerable. And so we're going to prepare ourselves by being as present as we can, right here and right now, with the Thich Nhat Hanh chant. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now. We'll say it 3 times. Let us be present in this amazing community and with one another for this afternoon. Join me if you can and if you will. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and the now. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and the now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Beautiful,
Thank you, Janet. Okay, once again, thank you everybody for being here. Before I introduce our next person, Blase Bonpane Jr., before, I wanted to mention a few names of some people, some of the of our honorary committee who are here today. One is Jim Lafferty, right here. His show has been on for over 30 years, and he's known Blase and Theresa for over 30 years. And Jim, thank you for everything you've done. Also in the back, Dave Clennon here is part of our committee. There he is. Worked with Blase and Theresa for years and years, and if you don't recognize, very, very famous actor. He's in so many movies, I can't even name them all. And very radical, truth-teller man, too. And I must say, I've met so many people through Blase and Theresa all these years. And another one who's here from the committee is Michael Novick. Where are you, Michael? Yes. There's Michael Novick. Michael is the interim general manager at KPFK right now. He's working. Yes, he's working for no salary. And he probably works 60 or 70 hours a week. So thank you, Martin, for all you do. Putting up change. KPFK is how I met Blase and Theresa, when I discovered Blase on the radio, and how I got involved as an anti-war activist. But I also want to give a few presentes right now. First, presente Blase Bonpane. Okay, and presente to my wife, Jane Doral. I want to say presente to Jerry Manpearl, who died on this last year. Jan here. And presente to Irina V. I never know how to pronounce Irina's last name, but Irina, the great little short woman who's such a great activist. How do you say her name? Anyway, Irina V. I always call her Irina. Presented to Irina, and also Paul Solomon, who died this year. Paul Solomon. And someone who died 3 weeks ago, raised the poor. Yeah. And Lawrence Reyes, who died this last year. And there's so many others I could name.
Don White.
Well, Don White, of course, Harrison, all the people we've known that are gone on to whatever happens after you die. But I just want to mention all those things. And everyone else I forgot, sorry. And I want to thank also my daughter, Emily, who's so for everything. She's got all organized all of the product food, and her boyfriend Gavin is here. And also want to introduce Mark Cole, back there. He's the head of Red Hand Press, and he'll be selling the books after. Sister Rebel. By the way, I read it. It's a fantastic book. I recommend everybody get it. Please sign it. Thank you, Mark. And now it's my honor to introduce another one of my favorite people here, Blase Bonpane. Blase Bonpane. Blase and Theresa's son.
I am so proud of my mommy. And she loves both of these songs. We're doing one as an introduction to this. Last night I had a Stranger's Dream, but the first one is by Phil Oakes, who many of you know and love. And this particularly goes out to the people in Palestine. All around this country, trouble in the air, and I feel the voices calling me, asking, do you know and do you care? Do you know and do you care? So I'm gonna do what I have to do, say what I have to say, and I'm gonna be what I have to be. Oh, won't you come on along with me? Won't you come along with me? Oh, I'm afraid of trouble. Yes, I'm afraid of jail. But I'm more afraid, Lord, not to try. More afraid what happens now if we fail. What happens now if we fail? So I'm gonna do what I have to do, say what I have to say, and I'm gonna be what I have to be. Now won't you come on along with me? Won't you come along with me? These two songs together are another way of expressing my mother's life story. And my father used to sing this song before many, many speeches.
Many times.
Yeah. Last night I had the strangest dream I ever had before. I dreamed that they had all agreed to put an end to war. And when the papers all were signed and 1,000,000 copies made, they all joined hands and bowed their heads, and grateful prayers were prayed. The people in the streets below were dancing round and round, and guns and swords and uniforms were scattered on the ground. Last night I had the strangest dream I ever had before. I dreamed that they had all agreed to put an end to war. Thank you so much. And now I would like to introduce my dear mother and the great activist, Theresa Bonbane.
Well, first we're testing. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, first, as I look around this room and see so many people I know, and I'm hoping to God that I'll remember your names as well as I remember your faces. But it's just such an inspiration to look out and see all of you together here. And forgive me if I have to do some reading. I don't usually like to read, but you do know that regardless of whether I have to look at the pages or I say it just like this, you know that it came from my heart because nobody else would have written it. I'll try not to do too much reading, but just to keep myself on certain. Okay, so first I want to say what an inspiration it is to look upon this wonderful group of people who I know are people who work for peace, justice, and better lives for all of our brothers and sisters throughout the world. And very special thanks to Frank Dorrell for hosting, initiating, and working constantly to get all of us together once more. And so Frank Dorrell, he initiated it, he's the one that inspired it, so to speak. Also to Mark Hall, who is at the red hand table over there. Mark Hall and his wife Kate Gale are the ones that published this book. They've published, I believe, 6 of Blase's books as well. And they've been after me for years to say, we've got yours down, Theresa, let's do it. And I've never had the time or energy to do it, but they helped to pull it all together, and I thank Mark for doing it. And I want to start... Yeah, tell me, that's good, thank you. Let me get a little closer.
We can adjust
Can
it so
you
you
hear it
can.
now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm trying to be able to read it too. Okay. All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so the title of my
No, the mic
speech
is
here,
somehow
the title of my
now.
speech here today, can you hear it?
No.
I'm sorry.
I must have.
Okay, the title of my speech is gratitude, because the more that I thought about this event and this gathering, and the more I think about my life at 88 years of age, the more that I feel every day so much gratitude that I just want to talk to you about that. So forgive me again for going back and forth. I hope you'll all indulge me today as I talk about something that is very important to me. At 88 years of age, we have had so many experiences and so many attitudes toward the different aspects of our life. And I find that today one of my greatest needs is the need for gratitude. I find that gratitude is the base of everything that I do that is helpful to me. Like many of us in this room, if not most of us, I have a lot of anxiety about what is happening in the world, as well as in our own daily lives. So as things get harder and harder in both areas, we have to stop more often and think, what am I grateful for? So that we can then have the strength to keep on going. We'll get this down, don't worry. When I look back,
Put that cord back where it was.
Maybe wrap it around the stem. Yeah, there you go.
okay, that gets in the way.
No, that's fine.
When I look back at my own life of 88 years, I remember some of the things that I'm grateful for. And the first one, of course, is that I was born to my parents, Martin and Winifred Killeen. The thing I love most about my parents and appreciate most, and that I'm grateful for to this day, is their incredible kindness. I felt that neither of them had a mean bone in their body. It doesn't mean that they were perfect, no one is, but they were so kind that I think that's been the prevalence in my life, their kindness. They weren't political, they were not highly educated people, but they were always kind and caring about other people, and that's it. They were always always there. So I had a childhood where I grew up in that kind of a spirit. So I had childhood with them, and I'll jump over to the time when I entered the convent when I was 20 years old. Thank you. I appreciate everybody helping me to keep the mic and all this together. I mean that. I'm not embarrassed by it. I decided in '88 I'm not embarrassed anymore. So I use it as an excuse all the time. In spite of the fact that many people knew that I was in the convent for 12 years, and I didn't always want to be in the convent. I hadn't wanted to enter the convent. I didn't want to stay in the convent, but I did because I felt that God was calling me, and that was my vocation, and I kept to it. So I'm not at all sorry for those 12 years, because there I learned something new about kindness. I was with a community of people, most of whom were very kind and caring, and all of us, I believe, in this room would believe that we felt that we were put on this earth to make the world a better place. And in the Our Father it says, "Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." So even if you don't believe in God or heaven or anything like that, I do know that you believe in making the earth a better place to live in. And that's what we have in common here today. I think that's what unites all of us here today, along many other lines. So I do believe in that, and I think that at Mariel, I learned much more about the world, about people of all different countries and ethnic groups, and all the things that we should know about one another. I learned so much during that time about not only experiencing and seeing what was going on in the whole world, but also learning to care about it. And that again is where we are all united here. Like, what role do I have? What is it to me that's what's happening over there in Gaza, for example, or wherever? It was everything to me. And it was everything to the majority of the people that I lived with in the convent. And so the dedication and commitment to making the world a better place, I learned this. It strengthened for me while I was in the convent. When I left the convent at age 32, I still found that what I was most grateful for was the peace community, which I immediately started acquainting myself with. And as I did that, I began realizing that it was the same motivation that all these people that I was working with had. And they were trying so hard to make the world a better place, that whether or not they believed the same way that I had started, we were all trying to make the world a better place. And we were motivated to do that. And we were given the courage to do that and stay with it. I'm grateful that I had that motivation and that I was able to be part of a peace movement, which has the same motivation, and I still have that to this day. And I'm so grateful for the peace movement then and now. So then, during this peace movement time, guess what? I also met Blase Bonpane. So how could I not be totally grateful for that experience? Little did I know I would meet, when I left the convent, little did I know I would meet anyone so perfect for me after I left the convent. And Blase and I both felt that we were not sure we would ever meet anyone that we would really want to spend the rest of our lives with. But we did. And we spent 50 years together. And I can't tell you how entirely grateful I am for that. And also the fact that even today, Blase is still very, very much a part of my life. Very much, and a part of our lives. I'm with him every day in one way or another, it seems, and I'm so grateful for the life we had together and for all of the inspiration I still get from Blase, even to this day. I'm grateful for that. After Blase and I got married, Colleen came along, and Colleen will stand up for a moment. Just a little bit. Colleen came along, and a year and a half later, Blase Martin came along. And who would have thought that we would have had this wonderful experience of two beautiful children? and that they are now enriching our lives and teaching us so many things that we never knew before. So they're here. I think in many ways, our active lives were very difficult for them, although we tried our best to be good parents as well as good political activists, and whatever else we were doing, and they did survive beautifully. They're both here with us today, and I'd like to ask them to stand up for a moment, which I guess I already did. And that's some of my gratitude. But now I want to go into a little bit more about the things I'm grateful for on an everyday level. And I think something that we, particularly those of us who are moving along in years, that as we get older and more people are dying that we've known and are not doing well in one form or another, but we still have all those memories, all of those enriching days with them, and also be grateful for all those that we still have with us and the peace movement and in all the other areas of our lives. And again, that makes me very grateful to see all of you here today, because I know you're not only here today, but you're here because you're part of caring about making a better world. So I'm always grateful that I have a peace movement. When things are happening as they are today in the world, which are horrendous as we know, that are so horrendous, that we know we have people out there fighting for peace, fighting for justice, fighting for equality, and that I'm so grateful for as well. I think gratitude for me conflates in some way, if that's the correct word. I think that it is with wonder and with faith, and why I say that I feel, since I have become a part of the peace movement and have become so aware of the world and its needs, I have also become aware of the wonder of so many things about creation that are so amazingly beautiful and wonderful. And people say, well, do you still believe in God? Do I? Yes, I do. I work at believing in God. I still say, I believe in God, help my unbelief, because we're always working on that part. So I do, and I'm grateful for that, and I think wonder and faith and peacefulness do conflate in many ways. As I read the daily newspaper and feel we are probably in the worst period of American history that I have experienced, I refuse to lament, but instead try immediately to transform my grief and anger into energy, to think about how to use our efforts, our websites, our emails, our telephones, our house parties, etc., into changing the world situation. I am sustained by being a part of the peace and justice movement. One of my favorite expressions is, la lucha misma victoria. The struggle itself is the victory. We have not seen many victories, but every time we stand up to injustice, war, and oppression, we are ahead of the game, and we are victorious because we're following our conscience and our heart, and we're doing the best that we can to make this world a better place. We have not given in to despair or inaction, but instead we struggle and fight for justice and peace. We are victorious. Our work over the years has shown us that we are dealing with mothers who cry and children whose lives will never be the same. Many of the young people that we send off to war come back changed forever. We must have the will to stop war. When you see the tears and stories of the mothers of the martyrs, you realize that there should be no more victims. Another permanent part of our work, which points the path to peace, is the saying, don't mourn, organize, show hill. All in all, a lot has been accomplished. Maybe the results weren't and never will be all that we want them to be, but what's the alternative? I decided long ago that my spirituality was not as a Catholic, but as a person who tries to make this world a better place. I really feel that if there is a God, I'm going to get along with him or her just fine.
Thank you so much, Theresa. Press the button. Oh, no?
Here comes your daughter.
No. Yeah. Thank you so much, Theresa. So much. What a great words from you. And now, Theresa's going to be interviewed by Mimi Kennedy and Larry Dilg. Come on up. Mimi, some of you might know, is a very famous actress. She was the hippie mother on Dharma and Grant, and she was in the show Mom, and she was in a lot of movies, and she was in Midnight in Paris with Woody Harrelson. Woody Allen. Yeah. Sorry about that. And also, I met Mimi and Larry through Blase and Theresa. Larry, they've been they're a retired English teacher, a singer, and been together many years with Mimi. And they're going to interview Theresa now, and then afterwards, you can buy books, socialize, and have more food. And what else can I say? That it?
That's great, Frank.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Great actors.
It's always an honor to be introduced by you, Frank Durrell, so yay. Yay, good day. That's good. Good day. Well, you have heard from Theresa. La lucha es misma la victoria, and the journey is the experience. And so we're going to go back, because I think human development, how we develop as peace lovers and then peace workers and justice seekers is the most fascinating aspect of human life on earth. So you're going to hear some of this book, and it's all in that book, but we're going to give you some ideas. So I'm reading. As a lapsed cradle Catholic myself, Theresa, I was fascinated by the parts of this book having to do with your decision to enter and then to leave the convent. Nuns take vows of obedience, chastity, and poverty. You have such a deep wish to be a good person, to obey what you thought was God's will for you to be a nun. Let's hear it in your voice. This first passage is from your first weekend as a nun, standing with fellow postulant, that's first-year nun trainee, for those of you who haven't had 12 years of Catholic education, Linda O'Brien, who is with us. Linda, stand up. It's so fun. I'd almost ask you to come up and do your line, but Teresa's going to read the whole thing. On a rooftop deck, they're standing on a rooftop deck at the Maryknoll property in Westchester, New York, which is one of the richest suburbs in the nation. I always envied the rich kids from Westchester, New York. You, Theresa, grew up in Troy, New York, an upstate city, a working class city. And it's not unlike my hometown of Rochester. It's certainly not a rich suburb. All right, read on, Theresa.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I remember, and Linda being here is so wonderful because we just had become not nuns yet. We were in the convent like 3 days when this occurred, and we were on the deck as was said here. And I said, I remember the first Saturday night up on the rooftop deck, watching a young couple in a convertible pass by on the country road that went through Westchester. I remember saying to Linda O'Brien, later Sister Marion Shawn, one of the postulants, oh my God, it's Saturday night and I don't even have a date. She looked at me astounded and said, well, it's not the first Saturday night of my life that I haven't had a date. I don't know about you. Well, it wasn't the first Saturday night of my life either, but I was never able to quite get used to the fact that I would never again go out on a date, go dancing, or anything else like that.
But the next page gives us a sense of what you got in return for your surrender of these things that had been so important in your teenage years. And it reminds me of what you later as an activist with Blase created for all of us who work with you in LA, the beloved community. And this is a great description of it, and it seemed to be your first adult experience of it. So go ahead and read that.
I began to feel the richness of life at Maryknoll, and I felt a real strength coming into me. It was overwhelming to be around so many people who were so incredibly committed to their aspirations. and I was inspired and enriched by my own feelings of idealism. Even though I entered the convent out of a sense of fear of God, I had always had an idealistic strain and a strong desire to do and be good. Maryknoll nourished a lot of that, and it also gave me insight into the greater purpose of being a human being. I learned that life should be about discovering the world around me and struggling to make the world a better place. I developed an inner richness and inner spirituality for the whole 12 years that I stayed in Maryknoll. This richness was the most integral part of my experience. I was incredibly happy on many levels. I loved Maryknoll and everything I was learning about people, life, and the world.
She goes on to say, but she never lost the desire for a husband, children, and family. Interesting. All right, yes, I know, well, we'll get to that too. But this made me think, Theresa, when I read it, about Gandhi. I've been reading a lot about his life because I'm interested in the development of him as the really creator of what we know as nonviolence. And he called many of his activities in nonviolence experiments in truth. He meant that he always didn't know the answer, but sometimes his experiments in finding the answer caused him to give up certain comforts or pleasures to clarify what nonviolence required him to do. And it feels like maybe your years in the convent were somehow required for how you were to lead your life later outside it. And I'm going to hand it over now to my husband, Larry Dilg.
I was an English teacher, so I'm going to talk from an English teacher type of point of view, or at least a reader point of view. And I have a couple quotes from Theresa, but we decided I would read the quote so Theresa can appreciate them as a listener and not just as the speaker. So, but I have a question first, Theresa. In childhood, you learned that God wants us to sacrifice, a concept that you associate in the book with giving things up because God wants you to. Now that notion of giving up has a lot to do with your becoming a nun and also with your leaving Maryknoll. It looks to me like the choices you have made in your adult life have much more to do with giving than with giving up. What do you think about sacrifice these days?
Well, I think that, one of the points that brought me into a convent and that made me help me to stay, or helped me stay 12 years, was based more on the fear of God than it was on the love of humanity or doing good or whatever, though those things always stayed in me as well. But really, I felt that if God calls you, and you'll see in the book the surprising way that he called me, but I didn't want to be a nun. I was having a wonderful time and dating and smoking and drinking and dancing and doing all the things that a teenager was doing. And but I realized that now, as I grew in this movement, I realized that fear is not the motivation. It's love, and it's really caring and knowing the world and knowing its problems and being part of them, being part of changing things. That is the motivation. So I don't think of myself as having, quote, sacrificed anything all these years after all. I think that I was fortunate to find the real vocation, and it's really to be here with people like are in this room, people who care about the world and make it heaven. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, and that's what we're doing right now.
When you think about the word sacrifice, you have fatio, the vice part to make, and you have sacri, which has to do with holy. So sacrifice is a making something holy, a blessing, which doesn't necessarily say anything about giving up. Anyway, there's a lot of rebellion in this book that is, after all, called Sister Rebel. And in addition to protesting injustice and resisting governments, there's smoking from second grade on, cutting school, joining Maryknoll, which made your family feel you no longer belonged to them, leaving the convent, and defiance of people who insisted you shouldn't include your children in your work lives. Yet, Most of us love you because of your kindness, your attention to people in pain and in need, and your penchant for joy and celebration. Over the course of the book, we discovered that your rebellion involves joining and uniting and organizing. In the account of your work in Chile, you dramatically reveal your transformation from child to adult. Torn between the fruitless desire to become perfect as a nun and your human desire to have children and a family, you talk to a nun who tells you that you're being tested in what she calls the devil's temptation. Talking with a priest about the same dilemma, you're told that God tempts those he loves the most. It's interesting, isn't it, that God and the devil are both giving the same advice? Earlier in life, you interpreted the story of Abraham and Isaac as a test of Abraham's obedience to God, as if being willing to kill your own child could ever be holy. At the same time, you didn't seem to pay much attention to Isaac. But after this turning point, as a reader, I've noticed that you increasingly notice the victims, what we might call the Isaacs, the children under the knife. The next thing that happens in your story is that you learn, as a student teacher, that teaching is imparting information in a systematic way. Now that sounds a little dry, but it's really, Theresa, what you do so wonderfully as an organizer, as a volunteer, as a leader. It's not the information that matters most, it's the process. La lucha misma, la victoria. Right after that, you discuss Pope John the 23rd and his injunction to be in and of the world. You take us immediately into the Chilean hills, where you share the poverty and generosity of the people of the community. It's really a beautiful part of the book, and it's clear that your heart is open. So let me just read you a little bit of it. In some ways, living in the mountains was basically what I'd expected. The building that we lived in was completely open, like a big hall, and we slept on flour bags filled with straw. Chicken and sheep were always running around the farm, which was right outside, making noise all night. We had no running water, no bathrooms, no sinks, nothing. When we had to go to the bathroom, we went outside in the bushes. In the morning, we were led to a hollowed-out tree trunk filled with water from the mountains, with a dirty rag hanging on the side, and this was supposed to be our sink. To my amazement, I loved seeing how people adapted to it. Every afternoon, we spent 3 or 4 hours walking through the mountains, through the hills, visiting little cardboard huts, telling the campesinos when to come down to the schoolhouse. The next morning, we would hold classes at 9 o'clock in the center house. I believe this was probably the most transformative experience of my life. Much of what I care about today has its roots in those 2 weeks in Chile, when we went up to the hills to arrive at people's homes, where they had nothing, absolutely nothing. Yet they always found a way to go out and find a peach in a tree or eggs laid by their hands to give to us. Sometimes they gave us some mate, an herb drink that always scalded my mouth and stomach to pieces. We always accepted these gestures of hospitality, no matter what they offered. They used tree trunks as tables, and they would spread clean flour sacks on them when they were serving guests. It seemed so elegant under these circumstances. They were so wonderful to us. We saw their poverty and sickness and the way the patrons, their bosses, treated them. Some of them were afraid to come down to the mission because their bosses wouldn't allow them the day off. Mothers of 4 or 5 little children were forced to leave them alone in those little shacks all day while they went to work in the fields with their husbands, fearing that the patron would free them if they didn't. Seeing all of this greatly impacted me. I didn't know it yet, but I had been thrown right into what would later become one of the most important causes in my life. Now, following that, you're sent to an intensive Spanish course that involves 6 months of isolation. The beautiful colors of the hills fade to black, a black that you, in other parts of the book, associate with the nun's habits and with the life of prayer. It's a painful section of the book to read, especially after your joyful teaching experience and the trip to the mountains. The reader knows you have to get out of the darkness. And when we see you dancing to Guantanamera at the end of that ordeal in that chapter, we're singing along with you.
Yeah. And so you left. You write that you'd begun to recognize, and others around you recognized, because you were physically and mentally run down, that you had entered the convent based on too much fear. And it was fear that kept you from leaving as you wanted to do. So you finally decide to leave. You left from Chile, where you were teaching in high school, after being formally released from your vows, including having to write a letter to the Pope. The day came when you went in regular clothes to the airport to fly away from the life you'd known and into the unknown. Would you read that scene, Theresa? It is unforgettable.
So I'm reading from here.
Yes, exactly.
A few of the nuns came to the airport with me that night. Oh, I'm sorry.
You might want this for that.
It's okay.
All right, it's okay.
A few of the nuns came to the airport with me, including one of my best friends, Sister Rose Carroll, who would later be killed in El Salvador at the time of the massacres going on in El Salvador. She was one of the 4 nuns who was killed at that time, and we were best friends in Chile. I said goodbye to everyone and walked to the plane. I had done this in my nightmares so many times before. As soon as I got to the plane, I would realize I had made a mistake, a huge mistake, but it would be too late. This time, as I walked up the ramp, turned around and said goodbye, I was crying, but not because I had made the wrong choice. I felt as if a giant boulder had been lifted off of me. I was so positive that I had done the right thing. I kept thinking, my God, why did it take me so long? I've done it, I'm through with it, I've made the right decision, and I'll never doubt myself again. On the plane, the stewardess came by and asked, would you like a drink? It was fantastic. I hadn't had a drink in 12 years. So I said, yeah, that sounds great. Of course, I really didn't know how to order. I used to know 12 years ago, but not anymore. She named a few and I said, yeah, that sounds wonderful. Then she asked me if I would like some cigarettes. They used to give out little packets, sample packages. And I remember thinking this was definitely my lucky day. I said, yes, thank you. And I had my first drink and my first cigarette out in the open. There was so much for me to think about, and I had a 21-hour flight ahead of me to rediscover who Theresa was after 12 years of being Sister Maura Killeen.
So you lived for a while.
At that point, I was still kneeling on the floor every night before I got in bed and saying my prayers. And Debbie said, I'll do that with you. And she came and kneeled and said her prayers as well. But there were other things that happened that I won't share, Debbie. Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Larry is
Well,
talking.
Blase and Theresa started dating in June 1969. Now let's just fast forward 5 months, pick up the story. After protests, we went over to Alvera Street for a drink. On December 9th, as we were walking through the little shops, I spotted some friendship rings. I hardly ever wore rings, but I wanted one. I found one for about $4.98, and I said, I'll buy this one. Instead, Blase offered to buy it for me. Okay, then I'll buy one for you too, I responded. And we found him a ring for about the same price. At the chapel on Alvera Street, there was a wedding going on. Blase said, now that we've got rings, maybe we should get married. Of course, I agreed. First, we notified his family that we planned to get married on January 1st. We never sent out formal invitations or made any phone calls. Instead, at demonstrations between December 9th and January 1st, we handed out flyers to our personal. Some of these people invited other people, and we said that was fine. We hardly did anything in preparation. We didn't even realize we should be preparing. Blase's 80-year-old mother got the caterers for us. We just put together this little ceremony. On January 1st, 1970, we got married at his parents' beautiful house. We decided to marry ourselves. That actually happens to be my favorite line in the whole book. We decided to marry ourselves. There were so many priests and ex-priests in the audience, we figured we were taken care of. We didn't have a formal priest. The wedding was absolutely wonderful. Everybody who was there in the movement, everybody who was there was in the movement. And we had asked that instead of bringing gifts, everyone should bring a reading, or a thought, or a poem to share at the ceremony. Everything people read was revolutionary. It was revolution this, revolution that. I hope you have a very revolutionary baby. Not everyone was charmed by the service. In a letter a few days later, Blase's cousin Vincent wrote, "When they started singing the Black Panther hymn, I gave up." We thought, Black Panther hymn? What is he talking about? So we thought over all the songs we sang, and one of them was Born Free. I thought that was their hymn. Within 2 years of the wedding, you had given birth to your daughter, Colleen. Child raising is one of the great themes of this book. All sorts of people advise you to leave the children with babysitters or in childcare. But it's very clear that you don't want to leave them alone. You keep your infants close despite criticism of other adults. Later, when they need more space, you give them room to discover things for themselves. Balancing work and family is a problem for all of us, and readers can take heart from your efforts to do so with love and respect. So as you write, we wanted to be part of the movement and able to spend time with our children, not just leave them somewhere while we worked all the time. We had a different idea, that the baby was a part of our lives, so she should be with us, not a stranger. Colleen came with us to every campaign meeting. I don't think during that whole year we ever hired a babysitter. We took her everywhere with us. I tried my darndest to be a good mother to Colleen. She hated to sleep. She loved being with me, which was a truly lovely thing. And I tried to be a part of that in spite of everything going on. I think for a baby it was probably a hard time because there was so much anxiety in our lives. But we were desperately trying to be caring, on-the-job parents for her. When Blase Martin came along, his personality and needs were obviously different from Colleen's, and that required some rethinking some assumptions, and continually balancing the needs of the movement with the changing needs of the individual children. Your book is not a manual of do's and don'ts, but it offers an inspiring model of how to maintain faith with large groups and intimate family members at the same time.
I agree, it's great, it's so wonderful to have you both here, because when we're raising our children, and Theresa was always my greatest advocate when I would say, I'm not sure I can do something because I have a breastfeeding or I have a toddler and I've been working, so I have to be, and you were always there. And you said, yes, I understand, children first, whenever you can do it. And then we wonder, have we messed up? Is it going to be awful? And here are her children. I mean, it makes me so happy. And, it's so beautiful. The boys and, teacher, doctor, making the world a better place in the ways they want to, not as they were forced to do. All right, we are going to read from the book, Theresa, now, and I'm going to have to get a book. Larry, could you? Yeah, thanks, darling. Share your book with me. Theresa said she's only written one poem in her life. She wrote it after she left the convent during this time of reflection that was so profound. And it's a poem, let me find it so that I'm not distracted when I speak of it. It's page 76, Theresa, in Spanish, and page 78 in English. And it's called El Salto, the leap. She wrote it just in that mode that you saw her smoking a cigarette and having a drink and having reflection for 21 hours on this airplane to become herself. You're gonna read each line in Spanish, because that's how you wrote it, coming out of Chile and this immersion in Spanish, and that's what she had been speaking. And as she left, she spoke that and wrote in that, and I am going to, line by line, give you the English and hope to do it with some rhythm that suggests the beauty of this poem.
Okay. El salto.
The leap.
Un salto
A leap
es como pasar
is like moving
de la luz
from the light
a la obscuridad.
into the darkness.
Es como pasar
It is like going
por un abismo.
through an abyss.
Es como pasar
It is like going
desde lo conocido
from the known
hacia el desconocido.
to the unknown.
Es como pasar
It is like ascending
desde el temor
from fear
hacia la esperanza.
to hope.
¿A dónde voy a llegar?
Where will I arrive?
¿Cómo voy a llegar?
How will I arrive?
¿Voy a llegar?
Will I arrive?
No sabemos dónde.
We don't know where.
No sabemos cómo.
We don't know how.
Solamente
We only know
sabemos que
that
hay que saltar.
we have to take the leap.
¿A dónde llegaremos?
What will we reach?
A la luz.
The light.
Excuse me. Okay. A la luz. Más luz.
More light.
Al conocimiento.
Knowledge.
A la experiencia.
Experience.
A la vida.
Life.
Y el temor.
And fear?
¿Por qué es tan potente?
Why is it so strong?
¿Por qué saltar y abandonar la comunidad?
Why leap and abandon comfort?
¿Qué hay en el más allá?
What is in the great beyond?
Saltaré.
Will I take the leap?
Aunque el salvo es la cruz,
Although the leap is the cross
el morir un poco,
and dying a little,
llegaré a la resurrección,
I will reach the resurrection,
a la luz brillante,
the brilliant light,
a conocimiento real,
to true knowledge,
a la experiencia total,
to the full experience,
a la vida plena,
to full life.
y seguiré saltando,
And I will continue to leap
y seguir muriendo para seguir viviendo,
and I will continue to die in order to live.
y habrá
And there will be
una serie de
a
llegados,
series of arrivals,
una serie de vivir de nuevo.
a series of living anew.
Si vale la pena vivir,
If it's worth it to live,
vale la pena saltar.
it's worth it to take the leap.
Vivir es saltar.
To live is to leap.
Yeah.